Hello everyone, this is Joshua here of Epictastic Joshua, and I'm here to give you a little disclaimer on this one. Before I show you the official revisited review for Superman 2 and Richard Donner's version of Superman 2, I would like to have a little bit of a disclaimer here, is that when I shot this video, everything came out the way it was supposed to have came out when I shot this on my mom's webcam on her laptop with a few of the others Superman related revisited reviews. Unfortunately, when it comes to it, in the process of editing it, while I was compressing it to make the size of the file a little smaller, there are moments where some of the audio is a little laggy, and also there's moments where the screen will stop, so I try my best to hide it by using some pictures and also using some video clips here and there for the video, and also just exporting this twice in the process of the audio. So I would have gone back and refilmed it, but I was on a time crunch when you're trying to get these reviews done and edit it before now, and there's not much I can do about the situation. So if you see those issues here, I sincerely apologize here, and I hope you guys still enjoy the video. That being said, here's the video, and stay epictastic. I love you guys.
Before Zod. I just had to say it. Everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Epictastic Joshua. I talk movies, TV, music, and anime. If you're a returning member, welcome back. If you're new, welcome. Welcome back to the Superman 2025 review series, and this is going to be a revisited review of Superman 2. But this is not just going to be one version of Superman 2. We're going to talk about the Richard Donner cuts. Yes, I decided to put them both together. It makes it easier that way. So this one is going to be an interesting one to talk about because we have two different versions. We have the 1980s one, directed by Richard Lester, and the 2006 version from Richard Donner. So this is going to be an interesting one to talk about. It stars Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, Mark McClure, Sarah Douglas, Terence Stamp, Margot Kidder, Jack O'Halloran, Ned Beatty, also Marlon Brando as well. In Superman 2, we have General Zod coming on Earth following the release of the Phantom Zone, which was a prison made for the people of Krypton. Zod wants revenge by imprisoning Superman, and so Superman has to fight Zod in the big fight. He also allies with Lex Luthor, who wants world domination, but also Superman or Clark faces internal conflict between being Superman and also him wanting to just be Clark Kent and be with Lois Lane. Production of Superman 2 is pretty much infamous. This was before the Zack Snyder Justice League situation or the Alien 3 situation. Basically what happened was they were making this and Superman 1 in 1977. The Salkind brothers decided that they will film Superman and the sequel back to back. So they started filming in 1978 and 1979. In 1977 and 1978, but tensions during the original director and Richard Donner and the producers arose, which resulted in a decision to stop filming the sequel, and 75% of that movie was already complete. And so after the first movie released in December in 1978, the Salkinds chose to fire Richard Donner as director, which was a controversial decision on the part, and even a lot of the actors didn't like it. Christopher Reeve didn't like it, Margot Kidder didn't like it, and even Marlon Brando was upset about it that he did not come back and do any additional filming. So several members of the cast and crew refused to come back in the wake of this firing, including Sarah Douglas, which she was the only one who knew about what was going on at the time. So to be officially credited as the director, Lester reshot most of this movie from 1978 to 1980. And that's pretty much what was going on in the time. And so they rewrote the script, and Christopher Reeve was unavailable at the time because he was doing his own movie outside of Superman 5 months into the production shutdown. That was just a lot of all this crazy stuff, but he demanded more artistic control, and also there was a lot of things that they had to get around, and Richard Donner refused to share credit. So this is one crazy production trouble story that we're talking about here, and it definitely does show in the final film. But in the years after this, in 2006, we would get a new version of the film, or the version that we got. Richard Donner was able to come back and do his version of the film, but he would have to work around some of the edited stuff, the weirdness, for him to create the Richard Donner cut. And so most completed but previous unseen moments that were seen, and they were able to be filmed and altered by Lester. And so we were able to get that cut back in 2006. So you see where I'm going with this? I know it's a headache, but you can look up a lot of this production trouble stuff. So there you are. Yeah. That being said, let's go into talk about the movie itself. I first saw this movie, I've only had access to the 1980s version. I never saw the Richard Donner cut until years later, which was recommended to me by Veritas of 591. So I found it and watched it, and I thought that version was better. But before I talk about that version, I want to give my thoughts on both cuts in a more efficient way. I'm going to. So rewatching this, going into it, I knew about the production troubles, and I expected to hate this version like some Superman fans do, to the point where they say it's unwatchable because of the production mess. And going into this version, honestly, I still really love this version, but you can definitely tell where things has been messed with. And I'm not going to do pros and cons to it. I'm just going to say my thoughts on this version and then my thoughts on the other version to make it more cohesive. But we'll start off with the pros of this version first. As a Frankenstein's monsters mess of a movie, I still think there is a lot of great things in this movie that does honor this original first Superman movie quite well in a lot of areas. For the scenes that does feel like Richard Donner's original vision, I actually really like those moments there. You can tell that Richard Donner, he wanted to make sure he honored it with respect, but Richard Lester's hand as well. And the moments where it's like, feels like Richard Donner's movie, those where I really like the movie the most. With the romance, I thought was very sweet and very genuine and very beautiful. I think those moments really does shine in the movie, and it really does kick it into a very good way. You definitely get some great moments in this with the romance and any of the Lex Luthor moments you do see in the movie, because as we all know, like I said, Gene Hackman refused to do reshoots for this, and I feel like he does good in the movie as well. It's Gene Hackman. He's one of the standouts in this movie. The way the movie feels like a continuation when it's Richard Donner's portion, it's entertaining as well. But I do like the romance between Clark and Lois, how he struggles with his identity, which has been a trope that we've used in future comic book projects and movies like Spider-Man 2 and Invincible and Miles Morales and such, it's pretty interesting there. And I do like that interesting trope. But here, it gives you emotional moments here, and I will say I did get a lot of that in there. So I really did like that part. Superman throwing an S at Zod's goons, which that is stupid. And it was not Richard Donner's filmed version, that was on Richard Lester's part. But I like that stuff. I like that part of it for the most part. And this just gets a laugh at me and a smile out of me every time he does that. Again, the Clark and Lois moments are genuinely beautiful, and you can tell that Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve still has that chemistry from the last movie, and it really does show in this film. The score by Ken Thorne is great as well. It's not as strong as the music in Superman. It's still a good enough score to where I can just go along with it and be like, hey, this is a great score. I love this. It's beautiful. It's exactly what Superman should feel like. And I really do like the fact that they did try to make it feel like Superman in the best they can. And it really does go for it. So I have to give them a lot of credit for doing that as well. I will also say some of the effects in this movie are still good too. Even though some of it hasn't aged the best. We'll talk about it when we go into the negatives of this version. But I will say overall, the effects are still good. The action is a lot more fun. It's definitely campy at times, but I do enjoy the Superman action for what it is. It's not horrendously bad action. It's good Superman action. If you're gonna have a Superman movie, you better have some action sometimes, but also never be afraid to focus on the story. And when it's like Donner's original vision, where it's more majestic as such, that's where I really enjoyed the movie at max. Direction from Richard Lester, he does do a good job in here. I'll say it. He doesn't do a bad job. For the direction and all the craziness that came with the production of making this movie, he tries to make it his own. But even though it's clearly not. So that is something I do give credit for, despite the circumstances of this version. And they play into it, and they try to make it successful. And I'll still say, the cast in this movie is still good. It's still a very strong cast. Say Christopher Reeve still does a good job as Superman. Here you get to see him use his powers. You get to see the Superman laser, X-ray, and heat vision. You see his strength. You do see his speed and invulnerability, and his super intelligence and using his brains and his flights. You also get to see Superman use his Superman freezing breath, which I think that's actually is cool. Superman tirelessly uses his powers, but there's even moments where when he has to get the inner conflict, Christopher Reeve is selling it. There's even points where he almost got me a little choked up watching him because he's just that great. Margot Kidder is still amazing as well in her parts here. There's one little issue I'll get to when we get to negatives with her, but I think Margot Kidder still does a great job here. Ned Beatty, I still think is very good here. Gene Hackman, I still think is very good. This time, he wants world domination with the 3 Kryptonian criminals to destroy Superman. That's a lot more interesting this time around than him using land, but it's very fun to watch. You also have Mark McClure still doing a good job as Jimmy Olsen. I definitely really still quite enjoy him as well. And I very much like his performance in this. Jack O'Halloran, you have Terence Stamp and Zara Douglas. As Non, you have Ursa, which as a kid, I had a crush on Ursula as a kid. Ursa. She was threatening, she is intimidating. And also, she was pretty attractive, so it also helps. Excuse me, shut up.
Oh my God.
And then Terence Stamp does a great job as Zod. Neo before Zod. But he is just menacingly intense, and I thought he does a very good job. You also have Valerie Perrine coming back as Eve Taskmaster. So I will say everyone in this cast does a very good job in their roles. Of course, some people are not here, which I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to say what I don't like in this, because we need to talk about this so I can talk about the superior cuts. Clearly, I do like this version, but make no mistake, my Epictastic Nation, this is a very flawed version here. It's no secret that this is a Frankenstein's monster of a movie with studio meddling. It's not really that emotional and disastrous as something like Justice League. It's pretty obvious. The reshoots are the biggest obvious thing. Between the extreme obsession with Richard Lester and his slapstick comedy, this is where it just gets a little bit too much. You have a lot of weird, goofy shit here, and I'm not against comedy whatsoever, but my goodness, some of the comedy in this movie, what the hell were you thinking when they allowed this?
Oh man, he's a deep shit.
Again, granted, you get some fun moments here, but it's just like, wow, no. And the remaining sequences in this movie, that pretty much all the footage that's in there is just the various shots of the Krypton villains, scenes from the first Superman, the 3 supervillains, Luthor getting out of the prison, Luthor escapes in the hot air balloon, goes to the Fortress of Solitude. The villains attacks the White House, powerless Clark beaten up by Rocky. Superman returns home to Lois. He goes to the diner, gets his revenge, and all the moments with the villains, especially with them being the Fortress of Solitude in the finale. But there is just a lot of moments in here where you have ice cream being blown off into someone's face, a man being blown over in the telephone booth and talking the whole time, an umbrella being spun around. It's like, no, it does not fit this version of the Superman 2. And when you're trying to clash with the tones here, which I'm not against comedy, because Superman, it can work for the most part. You just have to do it right and not egregiously camp in times. But it just doesn't mesh well with Donner's sincere, majestic, dignified, and revered tone of the original classic. Here, he leans into it just a little bit too many times at those moments, and it points to some sequences. With the identity being exposed by Lois, you also have General Zod and the goofy redneck crap while being a threat. And I have to talk about this because I have never liked this idea, even as a kid. Superman wiping out the memories of Lois. Who thought that was a good idea? Who? I've never liked that. But I will say, those negatives aside, the genuine issues that I hold here are some of the effects is a little weak in a few spots, and most of these effects, it looks good for the most part. Some of the pacing is good here, but some of the effects are a little weak in a few spots, and some of the pacing compared to the first movie is a little bit rushed and disjointed in a few sections, which the original theatrical version of this is 2 hours and 7 minutes. The Richard Donner cut is an hour and 56 minutes, which we're about to get to now. That tone doesn't really fit overall for the movie that you're trying to portray here, and it was really disappointing here. And if it was more like the Richard Donner version, had he got to finish it, I would be a little less frustrated about it, because as much as I do like this version, you can tell this is not Richard Donner's film, aside from the moments I did mention. But cutting out Marlon Brando easily, even though he refused to do the reshoots, is a massive blow to this version. And so, even with those issues and the chaotic production troubles, I'll give it to my overall grade when we got to it. But at least we got a much better version or a superior version for a lot of people in the Richard Donner cuts. But I can still watch this version nevertheless. But I'll talk about my overall thoughts on both versions and the movie overall when we get to it. Hello everyone, it is Joshua here. So as you are watching the video, this is kind of my reminder to tell you guys to, if you are the 80.4 to 90 or more, or the 5% returning members who are not subscribed to the channel, please be sure to subscribe to the channel because it does help this channel grow and it does help the algorithm as well. Also, if you're listening on Spotify to any of these reviews or live streams, please be sure to drop the 5-star rating on Spotify, on Epictastic Live Podcast, and comment your thoughts. With that being said, I click you back and enjoy the video. Now we get to talk about the Richard Donner version. So if you made it to this part of the video, thank you. I love you guys. There will be time codes for both versions as we talk about it. So this version, the Superman 2, is where it's at. Like I said, I love the Lester version, but this is it. This, because 75% of this was filmed before Richard got fired, and some moments where they have to work around it, which does make it a little awkward to complete this version for DVD at the time when Superman Returns was coming out. I will say this is a very well put together version of it, and the very nice thing that it starts off with is that it is very well a loving tribute to Christopher Reeve's memory. It's so beautiful the way this movie starts out. And Warner Brothers and fans petitioned Warner Brothers to do it, and it worked. Just like another one.
I've already talked about that.
This one, you get an early developed new opening, a new ending that were both envisioned before the theatrical release that Richard Donner had, which the sequel's original ending was reworked as the finale to the first. And this has newly created visual effects shots, early screen tests of one pivotal scene featuring Chris Reeve and Margot Kidder that they had to work around, and adding some key certain scenes filmed by Richard Lester. And also, not only that, I will say the studio got permission from Marlon Brando's state after his passing in 2004 to use archival footage of him and Superman Returns, but also for this. And I'll get to that moment when I get to it, but I have to say this is my preferred version of this movie. I love this version of this. So this is pretty much everything that was retained for Superman 2 is definitely in there. But this version here, we get some newly moments here. It feels more like in check with what he wanted to do with his version of Superman 2. And like I said, had he was able to be given the proper chance to do it, I think he would have succeeded very well. It feels more in tone with the original Superman film, with the earnest and the honesty, and you definitely are getting it as well. It gets that dignified and majestic and sincere tone back. And a lot of the goofy shit that is taken out of Richard Lester's version, even though there's still some of that in here, but you have to make it work. Even though I still like that version, you definitely get it here. It's a lot more thematically rich and more in line. You also have the humanity of Clark as he has to make this choice to serve saving the world, and his relationship with Lois Lane being foremost and forefront without being goofy. Great moments here. Again, the action is still very good here. Richard Donner's direction, you could tell this is more of what he wants to do. And it feels like we never left that version here. But like I said, you're having to play along with some of the obvious changes here, but you get some great moments in here. This some alternate takes. You get the original opening of the film. In this opening, Lois trying to figure out the similarities between Superman and Clark Kent. Perry White assigning Clark and Lois on the honeymoon racket in Niagara Falls. You get Lois testing Clark by Superman and jumping off the balcony in one moment, which was revised, that still appears in the theatrical edition. You have a scene in Niagara Falls hotel room, which that was pretty cool. It's a lot better this time around over whatever the other version was, which, like I said, that version of him revealing himself to Lois as Superman was pretty stupid. But of course, that was just pretty well done there. So I definitely really liked a lot of the way they did it here. So I very much love it when it comes to it. All the moments in here, I just think is very well done when it comes to giving us back the footage that we had, and it's just very well done. I think it's really creative here. So you definitely see what this version was going to be, and this was released 25 years or 26 years, or no, 30 years after the original theatrical release. So whatever. It is very much in line with that original film. But my favorite moment of watching this version was the fact that they put Marlon Brando's scenes back in, which is a nice, beautiful scene with Superman and his dad talking to each other. I love that part. Which, you know, some of the goofy, campy shit is fun. After a while, it just doesn't fit with what Richard Donner was going for. But here, it feels like, okay, we are getting there. And I definitely quite like what this has to offer. But that was my favorite moment in there. Lois Lane is a lot more intelligent this time around, which that was one of my issues with the original version. They kind of make Lois Lane a little bit of an idiot to keep the consistency there. I like consistency. The ending does repeat the same ending as the first one, but it's not really their fault, and this ending would have made a much better ending. And the time traveling and such, it's a little bit more flawed and such, and a little bit of some baby inconsistencies out there, but you know what? All of that is still pretty much there. It's not fully Richard Donner's fault. He has to use the same ending again. And there are some aspects of this that can be a little confusing, but it's less problematic than the stupid amnesia is. So with this version, overall, is very much the spirit of the movie that we were gonna get, have Richard Donner's take. In conclusion, to wrap up this massive in-depth review, Superman 2 is a great sequel, and this is how I'm going to talk about both of these versions. With the theatrical version, it's still overall a good version, even with the issues I have in the chaotic production issues. For the messy Frankenstein's monster that it is, and I mean that in a good way, because sometimes when you get a Frankenstein's monster, it can go. Still really enjoyed this version of Superman 2 from 1980. Not as much as I used to as a kid, but it pretty much does everything right for a sequel to it. There's still some great moments with Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, Superman being great. Also, some incredible action, some fun cinematography. The score is amazing, and I definitely enjoy a lot of what we're getting here in this. And when it gets to the moments of being like the first Superman movie, That's where the movie really does shine. But between some of the reshot moments and some of the goofy shit and some of the slapstick comedy that doesn't work on Richard Lester's part, and some slow pacing and the obvious meddling from the sour kinds, I can see why some people don't like watching this version. I know the production stories about this, but I can't hate this version as much. So the other Superman fans can hate this, and most of them do hate this, and a lot of the Superman fans can still love this version. But this one, it has its issues, but it's still a great enough version for what we got out of the production trailers. Whereas the Richard Donner version, of course, this is more of what we should have gotten in 1980s. You do have some awkwardness to it because it is still an incompleted version of the movie because of the Richard Lester stuff still being in there. This is the version for me that I like watching the most and feels more like the original film, even though I can enjoy both versions at the same time. It's much like with the cuts of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the theatrical extended cuts of American Gangster, and even the versions of Watchmen I've seen. Theatrical, the ultimate cut with the Black Freighter cartoon, and even the director's cut, which I have on Blu-ray, and Apocalypse Now, which I've seen the theatrical version, but not the Redux cut yet, where I can enjoy the same versions of the same movie with Richard Donner's intended choices, the acting, the action, the humanity, the thematically rich themes. The overall tone is consistent. The characters are like how they are in the original film. And it's still a good enough movie. I happily enjoy watching both cuts, especially this is one, because this is the one I like to go back to. And it's always a great thing to see a different version of a movie, and should be a prime example of these studios, whether it's a big budget film or an independent film, to trust your directors with these types of movies, or any film for that matter, and not get your little panicky hands in and studio interfere or put a mandate on them, because then when you start studio mandate and studio interfering, you don't get the movie you want. You get a complete disaster. But even with the small issues here, we're going to go ahead and grade Superman 2 right now. For the Donner version of this, I'm going to give it an Epictastic. And for the Superman 2 Richard Donner cuts, I'm going to go and give it, even with the small issues, my Spider-Verse seal of approval. And overall, I would give it a better than Vampire Academy. It's almost at the Spider-Verse seal of approval there. That was a lot to talk about with both cuts, but I decided to do it for you guys to make it a lot more interesting. Next up in the Superman review project, we're going to get to the one that people like to say is the beginning of the end for Superman. And that is Superman 3, followed by Supergirl, Superman 4, followed by Superman Returns Revisited and Man of Steel Revisited. This has been Epictastic Joshua Drake. As always, stay Epictastic, join the Epictastics, and you guys keep it cool.
Well, that's going to do it for the video that you just watched. If you want to see more, my channel icon is up here. If you want to see more content from me, all my social medias are right here in this end card. I will also leave a playlist and a video here for you to see what the channel is about. As always, acknowledge me, stay Epictastic, join the Epictasticness, and you guys keep it cool.